Hi, Judy.
Hey Graham, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Got the Army Navy game today, which is big deal. Army
Oh,
Navy.
right.
So, we're in an army town now, so we could.
Where are you, Julie?
I said we're in Huntsville, Alabama, which has an army base in it.
Ah, yes.
Before we were near a Marine base, which tended not to like the Army and the Army Navy game.
Yes, yes, of course.
So, yeah, that's our
Graham,
Hello, Gillian.
hi, can you hear me okay? I've just put headphones in.
Yes, very well.
I had a question for you this week. You showed us your diffuser last week.
Yes.
What material are you using for the white part of the diffuser?
Polypropylene sheet, 0.5 millimeters in thickness.
Okay, because we have limited resources here in Cape Town. And I eventually found it's an American company, it's massive. It does film shoot rentals in Cape Town. And I was able to get some diffuser material from them. It's a little bit like Mylar. So it's not a thicker white, but structurally it feels a bit like Mylar. And I got the 1/4 inch, I think, and the 1/2 inch.
Yeah, I want to qualify. The actual front of the diffuser, the diffusion material itself, is 0.3 millimeters, and I haven't got it yet. It's on its way from China at the moment, sitting at the airport.
So I've got a 0.3 diffuser that they use. Well, they got a whole room full of the stuff, but they're now all switching to LEDs. So it was fascinating to visit and see what they used to use. But I was able to buy a meter of the 1/4 inch, and I just bought I think the half inch, or well, no, sorry, 3 millimeters, I think. And anyhow, it just lets a little more light through. I was just curious because I went back and looked at your presentation, and you seem to have a more opaque material.
Well, I was using. First of all, I tried Lee diffusion gel. It's a professional diffusion gel.
Yes, I looked at them.
And it's very good, except it's a bit more like greaseproof paper in as much as it's crinkly and folds, whereas the polypropylene tends to bend in a nice arc. I found that I needed 2 sheets of gel, probably separated, of the Lee gel, probably get more light through, but I'm hoping to get away with 1 sheet of 0.3 millimeter white polypropylene.
That's what I've got, diffuser gel. I was surprised that people actually knew. Sorry, gone on to a laptop. I was surprised actually they knew what I was talking about, because it took me about 2 days to find out what I was looking for was called, and that was why I was trying to get hold of you. And then I didn't know if you were on Discord. Then I looked on Discord, and I didn't know if you had a sort of different name.
Yes, I am. I think Alan's arrived, by the way, so he probably would like to take over rather.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Bud.
If you can get it on Amazon, it's it's really flexible. It's just Mylar, and it's been working well for me.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to AfterStack. I am going to turn things over to Bud and ask him if he could give us a brief synopsis of how his visit with Zeiss went yesterday.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
I've had problems with my computer, and it is slowed down, so I'm working on it. So I apologize in advance. It's one of those things. I need a new one as well. The thing with Zeiss was interesting and disappointing. it's always both. I learned quite a bit. I learned how to use dark field. I learned how to use, the polarized light. He got my DIC set up pretty well, but he wasn't familiar with the scope because it's an old scope. And so he's a young guy, and he had to fumble through a few parts, as you might expect, to figure things out. But he's done enough teaching with microscopes that in the end, it was a successful journey. But if somebody had known the scope, from the get-go, it would have been a whole lot different experience.
Interesting. But I guess not surprising, but it was worth it in the end, you think?
I think so. Sid Crandall had wrote me a note and told me I was wasting my money. You new guys wouldn't, know anything. So he's the guy I bought the scope from. But, I learned about what I need. I need a dark field condenser if I'm going to do transmitted dark field light. And it'll do reflected light dark field just fine. So that's nice. I was able to use one of the lenses has a full wave plate in it, and so you can get the background to change all sorts of colors and things. So that was interesting. And he cleaned out my condenser and wiped down all the optics, so that was worthwhile, and he adjusted some things were too tight, and he put some new grease on them. So all of the maintenance type stuff was definitely worth it. I was hoping to learn a little bit more about the modalities and the potentials, but I think I've got enough that I can get going.
Great. Susan, did you enjoy it?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get you.
What were your thoughts, Susan?
The things that I was looking to learn, I did, not so specifically, but just seeing how he approached cleaning the lenses. And with your setup, I learned how many different lenses you can have for different things, and how many different things you can do. So I was kind of impressed with that. So, but well worth my day for sure.
Excellent.
So, what do you think about the bug room in general?
Oh, perfect.
All right.
Yeah, he's got it organized, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a wonderful workspace.
So back to the AfterStack. Go ahead, Alan.
Yep. But I'm going to turn it over to you, sir. It's your week, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Very good. I guess what I'm going to talk about, to start to talk about, remember this is a round table, and so I'm just bringing up the subject, hitting some high points, showing a few slides, and then I'd like to know how everybody uses, blend modes. I think that most of you here probably do use blend modes. Is there anybody that does not? All right, so we have no show of hands. That's a good sign. All right, so at this point in time, let me share screen and see how many problems we'll have with the computer. Hopefully none. All right, so with the shift key down, I can do this one. Now the desktop, Alan, let me ask a question. If I choose the desktop, can I open anything I want?
Yes, the desktop will just give you the image of whatever is on your desktop. If you choose an app, that'll only show that app.
All right, let me try that to start with then, because this is sort of new to me.
Okay.
So
I'm going to desktop.
Okay, so you can see my desktop. All right, so what I'd like to do then is to come into this area, and we'll start up here. Can everybody see that okay?
Perfect.
All right, AfterStack 12, is it big enough?
Yep, fills the screen.
Okay, excellent, because Bill Wheeler had tried to get me where I could do it, so I was trying full screen with all of the stuff, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you're in Lightroom there, right? So you can, no, that's not Lightroom.
No, this is Keynote.
Keynote. You can just, if you hit the green dot in the top left of Keynote, it will fill your screen completely. And
okay, I got it.
Yep. Okay. All righty.
So let's see. So let's talk about the recap. And this is from Alan's talk, and this was about brushes. And Alan discussed creation of various uses of brushes in the tool, and then Diane and several other members jumped in, and we had a successful talk about brushes in general. There is an item that I would like to mention about brushes before I move on, in case I forget, and that is when you put a blend mode on a brush, which you can do, 2 new blend modes pop up. These blend modes are called behind and clear. Is anybody familiar with either of those?
No, never heard of them.
All right, well, let me see if I can go to Photoshop and I will show you real quick. I'm going to go over here. You see just an empty square?
Yep.
Okay, I have a paintbrush selected. I'm going to paint with green, 100% on everything. And that's on normal blend mode. You see it up here in the corner, in the left upper corner?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Says normal. Now I'm going to change my brush to behind. Do you see how there's 4 things now? There's behind and clear.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so behind, if I change the foreground color, let's say red, since it's a Christmas kind of a thing, that's an ugly red. Let's get closer to real red.
It's more like blood.
It does. So if I want to paint behind and I have a brush, let's make the brush a little bit bigger and I'm going to make it hard edged. If I paint, it
Oh, that
paints
is so cool.
behind.
I did not know that mode existed. Is that fairly new?
No, I think it's been there a while, but it doesn't show up unless you change the blend mode of the brush itself rather than a layer. So when you change the blend mode of a brush, you're painting on pixels, so you're in destructive mode. And it only paints on clear pixels. Okay. So those are the requirements. It has to have clear pixels to paint on. It'll paint behind it. And if you're doing it on something else, it's probably destructive. All right, so let's get back to the show. I just wanted to bring up that since we were talking about last week's stuff and brushes.
What does the clear brush, the clear blend mode do?
All right, I'm glad you asked. So the clear blend mode, you see my marker?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Clears
it's
it
like
all.
An eraser, but it can be used because you can create all sorts of brush shapes and it clears just that brush shape. It's not like the eraser per se. If you hold down the tilde key, I'm going to put it back on normal. If you hold down the tilde key, it does the same thing. You don't have to change it to clear.
Cool.
Okay. So in all the brush modes, the tilde key will turn the brush into an eraser. Whether it's normal, whatever, it will always erase. All right. So enough said on that. So any questions about what we did last week? All right. Can you see this now, the blend modes trainer?
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the link. I put it in a Dropbox. If you click on that link, you'll have my PSD file and you'll be able to do what I've done when you see it done later in the presentation. Okay. I don't know, is it big enough to read?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So it should be available to you. All right. So with that said, let's talk about some blend modes. So blend modes in Photoshop is all about mathematics, and it's all about looking at the channels. Okay. So nobody really wants to talk about mathematics. We really just want to know how it works. But blend modes are mathematical equations that blend layers together to create unique effects. They allow you to modify how pixels interact between a top layer and a bottom layer. So in order to blend something, you have to have 2 somethings. Okay. So this is sort of what it looks like. If you think about layers, you have a base layer and then you have the layer, the red one, that you're going to change the blend mode on. and then it looks at its comparative pixel, just like you had two checkerboards on top of each other. It's looking at the pixel for pixel. It's not looking at this pixel and then over to the corner. It's looking straight down at its comparative pixel. And something happens in the math and it changes the way the image looks. So if this was a solid red color layer and I changed it to a blend mode that allowed it to show through, then this red layer would be applied in some opacity to the layer beneath it with restrictions, whether it be on the light side, the dark side, or if it's changing color. So anything can happen depending on what the mathematics you tell this layer to do. This is the blend layer, how it's going to affect the layer below it. So this is the pull down menu. So the left image I have here is basically what your layer panel looks like. And here's layer 0. And you can see this normal up here. This is where the blend mode drops down from. And when it drops down, you have these options. The dissolve option is used in the graphic world. It makes letters and things kind of look like they're dissolving into pixels. You know, it gets a real pixely looking edge, and you can change the opacity. Not much that we use that far in photography. The darken blend mode, multiply blend mode, but to see these horizontal lines, are you able to see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you see my pixel? I might can get something better. Let's see if I can.
Pretty clear, bud.
Is it clear? Well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So this section here is all about darkening. So all of these things do a different way of darkening. These do a different way of lightening. This third section is all about contrast. This down here is about difference and exclusion. Not very useful except for difference. I'll tell you about that in a moment. And then the last one's about color. You can separate color from luminosity and luminosity from color pretty much like you can in lab. So here you can make color things happen without changing in contrast. And down here you can change in contrast without changing the color saturations or whatnot. The hue, hue, saturation, and brightness. So here the hue is dominant. Here the saturation is dominant, and the other two don't change. But let's move forward and see what we got. That. Okay. Let's see. That's not supposed to be there. Let's see if I got. That's not supposed to be there. Hang on. Let's move these down to where they're supposed to be. I'm so sorry. I don't know why things get shuffled, but sometimes they do. Okay, so that's where we were, and this is the divisions that I was telling you about. So this is good to remember because when you want to do something, these are what you'll be choosing to use. Okay. There is a really good video on YouTube. It's by Colin Smith. He's a very good instructor. And if you want to know more in detail, I suggest that you go to his vault. He will ask you for an email. That's the cost of this free ebook. And it's worth having. And Colin Smith is a reputable guy. So the normal blend mode is just what you see when you paint in 100% opacity and 100% fill, or not fill, but flow. I'm sorry. And so basically it's a solid color. You can change the opacity and, you can do it that way. But otherwise, there's no mathematical blending between the top layer and the bottom layer. It's just like if you had no blend mode at all, and this is the default. So the darken and the lighten blend modes, they're quite interesting. When you think of that checkerboard over the checkerboard where you're comparing pixel location to the same pixel location in the layer below, in the darken blend mode, it compares those two pixels and it chooses the darker of the two. So if you had, say, well, let me just show you an example over here. We'll go back to this one. So in this scenario, let's turn that off for the moment. And I'm going to have to shrink this up a bit. Okay, and I'm going to change. This blend mode is on normal. So as I go through these blend modes, you'll see that as I go to darken, nothing happens. Well, the reason nothing happens is that I have superimposed two gradients, identical gradients, one over the other. One's not darker than the other, one's not lighter than the other, nothing happens. But if I put some horizontal bands across it, and now I change the layer of the horizontal bands to darken, watch what happens. Only the dark band is effective over the whites. Okay, there's normal, there's darken. So the darken pixels are dominating. If I go to lighten, the lighten pixels are dominating. Okay, let's put this back to normal. And I'm going to turn it off. Now I put a grayscale vertically over these, and we can take this grayscale then and we can go to darken. And you can see that it can't darken any pixels less than maybe zone 4. And when I'm talking that, I'm talking about this area right in here. You see how right now it darkens all the way down. Watch where it turns off when I go to darken. So I'm on the darken blend mode, and you can see where they merge. Okay, so from basically just below the 50% gray line down, nothing changes. It only changes in the light area because darken is only allowing the darker pixels to come forward. Okay, so if the darker pixels are on the base layer, they're the ones that show up. If the darker pixels are on the blend layer, they're the ones that show up. It always picks the darkest pixel at that pixel location. Okay, if I go to lighten, just the opposite will happen. So now I've been able to lighten all the dark areas, and I can't lighten something that's already lighter than middle gray. Okay, questions?
So it doesn't bring the white point or the black point forward, as it will, does it?
No, it can't. If something's darker than your, let's say you use a clone stamp and you take a sample and it's somewhere, you know, it's not near black, it's a dark gray. It can't darken black. It can't darken any grays that are darker than it. It can only darken lighter things like the fuzz we see around bug hairs. Okay, so when you take a selection of the background, which is in my case usually darker, I can use that and paint around at a low flow rate the bug hairs, and that glow goes away, and the bug hairs will remain sharp because they're closer to white.
So that's what achieves that balance then. That I mean, I've just been doing some myself recently, and yeah, it was quite pleasing the way only the light bit is touched almost, and around it, everything, you know, not everything else goes darker with it. So it's picking up the lightest parts, is it? There's nothing in there that, well, I guess that chap goes to link. It's probably something in his stuff that would explain it a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into the mathematics. That's
no. That's right.
okay. So in any way, just remember that these are just 2 layers. It's going to pick the darkest or the lightest pixel depending on which blend mode you've chosen between the 2 layers, and it brings it up. Okay. Let's go back to here. And so that's what that's all about. When we go to the multiply blend mode, this blend mode darkens by multiplying the luminance values of each pixel of the base layer and corresponding pixel of the blend layer. So it takes the numerical value of those pixels, both below and above, and it multiplies them together. The net effect is it's a darkening effect. The black remains black because you can't get blacker than black, of course, but white is not affected because, interestingly, when you look at the mathematics, on the white side of the scale, the blend layer, the white pixels are actually clear and is showing the white beneath. Okay. So let's go back and look at our little scale again. I'm going to turn this one back off. We'll turn this one back on. And we're going to go and show you what multiply looks like. So here's normal. Here's multiply. Do you see how much it's darkened? Right.
So it's effectively increasing the contrast, Bud.
It increases the contrast fairly dramatically. Now, a person like Dave Kelly uses this and he will open the curve, but he's not planning on bending the curve at all. To him, it's an empty container only to apply a blend mode, and he will apply the blend mode multiply, and then he will use the opacity to set what he wants to do. So he's increasing the darks in his landscape. You can do the same thing with insects, of course, or minerals. Okay,
so this,
go ahead.
Sorry, but I was going to say, so this wouldn't be any use for the sort of brightness round hairs on the bugs, would it?
Yes, it would, because the lightest hairs up there you see are unaffected. And I think Alan does this. I think he will paint around the hairs with the multiply blend mode. Is that right, Alan?
It is. Yeah, I use the multiply and the screen or alternately, so for that very purpose.
Okay. So
it just protects the color, the parts you don't want to cook out.
So if I change this to multiply, and now let's go up and grab the opacity slider. You see how I can change it all along, so you can find where the hairs are protected and the other stuff disappears. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Okay. Mm. So use the opacity, then you can control the multiply on any layer that you have that blend mode. Okay, so screen is just the opposite. So if I change this blend mode to screen, you will see that instead of darkening, it's going to lighten, but it can't lighten black. The black pixels on a screen blend layer become invisible and the black shows through. Screen looks like this. Normal, screen. You can see normal on the left. You can see screen on the right. So you can see that it's brightened down considerably below middle gray into almost zone 2 or 3. Black remains black, and you have white almost dominating down to just above the middle gray line. Can you see that okay? Mm-hmm. Again, if I put this on screen and you use varying opacities, you have control of screen, and you can use it wherever you like. Questions? All right. So that's blend mode, multiply, and blend mode screen. It's the opposite of multiply. It lightens everything but black. Black becomes clear in the blend layer. The net result is the image is that black remains black. Now, when you look at something like a wave in the ocean that's breaking and has white foam, you can use multiply because it can't darken the white foam, but it could darken the waves. Does that make sense? If you have snow, you can darken things in the shadows, and then the middle grays and the snow remains pristine. In the screen mode, let's say I'm taking a picture of a bug's eye and there's black in between each of the lenses. I can lighten the lenses with screen mode because screen does not affect the black. Okay. So I can play with the contrast because I know that these can't touch either black or white, depending on whether you're in multiply, which is white, and screen can't touch the black. So now we move into contrast modes. We have been dealing thus far with basic, well, I guess you could say that screen and multiplier contrast, but they're in the lighten and darken sections. Now we're in the contrast section, and the overlay and soft light blend modes are the most useful at this location. So these blend modes increase contrast. The overlay blend mode is stronger in effect than the soft light blend mode. So the pixels at 50% gray become invisible on both of these modes. The middle gray invisibility is often utilized to good effect. An example would be a pixel layer filled with middle gray and set to a blend mode of soft light. This technique is known as burning if you paint on the gray layer with black paint. So a gray layer, middle gray layer with soft light blend mode, and you want to use it to burn softly. You use this at a reduced flow or reduced opacity, and you paint, on us. I usually paint on a new layer, but you could do it destructively if you wished onto a pixel layer. But this is when you look at the TK 9 panel, when you click on burning, this is what he gives you. If you click on dodging, it's a gray layer with the overlay blend mode painted with white paint is dodging. They use soft light because the black is a little more aggressive. So soft light being less aggressive makes it a good combination. And overlay is better when you're dodging because it seems to work better together. So a gray layer with overlay painted with white, you can dodge different areas. And that's what the TK panel also offers you. When we look at that on the blending tool, if you would, we're right now at normal. And if we come down to overlay, this is what happens. You see how much more black you have on the right side and how much more white you have on the right side. So this is very much a contrast, but right in the middle at middle gray, the pixels are clear. They may not show it here because they have a different background. It's not middle gray background. So the middle gray disappears in the blend modes, overlay, soft light. Fact is, in this whole comparison section of the contrast section, middle gray is usually invisible. So in this instance, this is overlay. As I move to soft light, you'll see it's not as aggressive. Back and forth, overlay, soft light. They both do the same. But here you've got a bigger middle gray area, and here you have a shorter one. Can you appreciate that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So overlay is used, when you're dodging, and soft light is used if you're burning, and both of them on middle gray layers. One uses black paint, the other uses the white paint. There are 8 special blend modes, which I have highlighted for you. These are the only blend modes where when you go into Photoshop and you look over here on the right side and it says fill at 100%, it's the one right below opacity. Fill works on these blend modes. Okay. You won't be able to tell it on the grayscale because there's not color involved. But what you have is that you can see where they live in the darken blend mode. So color burn and linear burn. And the lighten mode, color dodge and linear dodge add. I didn't name these. Vivid light, linear light, and hard mix are all in the contrast section. And in the comparative section, difference is also affected by fill. So in all of these, if you open them, well, let's just go and show you an example, perhaps. That would be the best thing to do, I think. So let me see if I can find here. And let's go into color wheel. It's thinking, it's trying. Come on, baby, you can do it. I'll give it a second and we'll see if it'll pop up for us here. Here we go. It's just, can you see the mount, kind of a sand dune scene?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take, this is our sand dunes. And I'm going to put on the multiply blend mode by going to the next level up. And you can see that that multiply blend mode darkened it. My fill is at 12%. This is what 100% multiply looks like. So before multiply, you take the same, you duplicate the layer, you change the layer blend mode to multiply, and you get this. Now, we all know that you can reduce the opacity to get pretty much what you want. That's 0. And as we ease up, you'll see it's pretty much leaving the whites alone, but it's darkening everything else. Okay, so you can get some kind of nice effects with that because it's more darkening toward the shadows. Okay, let's turn that one off and we'll come up to, this is color burn. And color burn at 100% looks like this. Not very useful. But remember, this is one that has the fill mode, which is active. And if you bring that fill down to about 10 to 15%, that's 15. And then you use the opacity slider, you can get some nice effects out of it. Okay. The mathematics on these, they're strange to me. I don't understand them. I won't go into them. What I like to know is what effect it can give me. So in this instance, you see it's leaving the whites alone quite nicely. The highlights are pretty much left alone. And so you can increase contrast, but this is one of the special 8 blend modes where fill is effective. This is linear. That's the normal. This is linear burn. Linear burn, again, not very useful at 100%. Let's take the fill down to 15%. There's 15%. I could probably take it even less. Let's take it down to 10%. And now let's use our opacity slider. And we can actually decide whether we like this picture. It's opened up the shadows just a little bit. The sky's a lot darker. But again, you can create an atmosphere using linear burn. If we go to the next example, which is darker color at 100% looks like this. And there's no change. And you say, what's going on? Well, darker colors like darken. You have to have something darker in order for it to work. So if I put, well, let's see, I could probably put levels on here. And I could darken the levels a bit. And now when I go to, let's clip it. So now if I go to darker color and I reduce the fill, you see now it's effective because I have something that's darker to compare it to. So darker color, like darken, needs not itself because the pixels are all the same. It needs something darker or with light and lighter in order to affect any change in the image itself. I think that's, let's go back. Let's see if there's anything else I want to show you on here. So in this instance, there are two other modalities I'm going to show you and talk about a little bit. One is color and one is luminosity. Let's see where I am in my schedule over here so I don't get ahead of myself. Well, look at there, the luminosity blend mode. Useful in reducing the increase in contrast, often seen when increase in saturation of colors. So luminosity separates from color and color separates from luminosity. And the way this works in the real world is, let's take this down here and we'll change let's put this blue down here with it. Hang on. So I have this blue mode on luminosity. And so 100% fill doesn't affect it, but opacity does. And so you can see as you back down, you can add blue into the shadows. I will turn the blue off so you can see. It gives it kind of a strange effect. But if you're trying to increase contrast, I didn't do that very well. I should have something. Let's try it with a different layer. Hang on a second. Let's go with a curve. And let's just change this curve a bit. And now we'll change this to luminosity. And you'll see that it tries to keep it. In other words, the contrast shows through, but it tries to keep the original colors. So if I turn that one off, they're the original colors. I have a very contrasty curve. When you normally do contrasty curves, you get a lot of saturation, and you can see this tries to prevent that saturation. Okay, so luminosity is changing the brightness and the darkness of the pixels, but it tries to keep the hue and saturation the same. Okay, now if we take this same curve and we change it to color, so in this instance, it's trying to keep the contrast the same, but you can really augment the colors. So in colors, you can go as saturated as you want, but it's maintaining the normal luminance values based on the base layer. All right, I know there's some questions. Fire away.
Yeah, but is there, so you're keeping the saturation, but the luminosity is kind of like telling it, well, you're not going to be darker in the darks and you're really just going to smooth it to like a medium?
It's trying to keep your, if you think about lab where contrast and detail are separated from color, that's basically what these blend modes are attempting to do. Okay. So what this is trying to do is let you change the saturation and hue of the colors while maintaining best you can, and it's not perfect, the luminance values, the brightness values. So when I try to maintain, just watch the darks and the lights, and you'll see that the lightness values do the best they can to stay the same. Okay. If I change this back to luminosity and I do the same thing, you can see that the colors are trying to stay the same, but the contrast can be dramatically changed.
Would it be also easy to do that with black and white? Like say you had, a black and white image and trying to take the luminosity, but keep the contrast of the black and white the same?
I have not tried it on black and white. And part of its definition says color, but gray being a sort of a color, I guess it could work. I don't know that.
I'll try it in a minute.
Yeah, I don't know that, but this is the way it does the color. So color and luminosity, when you change the contrast in something, you've seen it get oversaturated and you go,
Right.
don't like it. Well, that's where color will preserve your luminosity, but let you have those saturated colors. Or inversely, you put it on luminosity and your colors can saturate without change in contrast. Did I say that backwards? I could have. Anyway, the contrast changes with the luminosity. Color changes with the color.
Got it.
So this is basically a definition of the color blend mode. Allows you to add color to an image without adding contrast. So they effectively allow you to change the way you do things. So what I thought might be interesting is just to take some of these things on other images and, perhaps see how they work or, if they work. I have this, which is basically the description of what happens with each of these layers. I thought I would at least add it instead of reading it. We've gone over it. The one that is used quite a bit by a lot of people is linear light. Linear light burns and dodges at the same time. It decreases or increases brightness depending on the blend color. If the blend color is lighter than 50% gray, the image is lightened by increasing the brightness. If the blend color is darker than gray, the image is darkened by decreasing the brightness. So linear light increases above gray, decreases below gray, and effectively dodges and burns simultaneously. And a lot of the YouTube teachers use linear light quite a bit, and I would highly recommend you learn how to use it. Perhaps look at a YouTube video. There's some real interesting effects you can achieve with it. Yeah. Bye. Hard mix is what I use, and you've seen me use it on masking, because it takes anything. If you're on the foreground color of black and you think of a mask being black or white, then the black will take anything gray and make it black. If it's on the white paintbrush, it takes anything gray and makes it white. So it gives you a hard-edged mask if that's what you're looking for. It's a good way of painting out the interior of stuff, if you're in a mask. So difference is what you use if you're trying to superimpose two images that are identical. Say I have a leg that was no good. I think I've showed you this in the past on an insect, and I have a good part over here. So I copy that leg and I move it over, and I want to get it into the same position so that the foreleg looks like it's normal. I use difference on the part that I've copied to move over. When the pixels line up, they are black. If they're not lined up, there's color around them, pretty much like, extreme chromatic aberration. But once they line up, it turns black, and you know that you have pixel over pixel and that you're good to go. So I don't worry so much about the tip of the foot, because that's what I'm replacing. What I'm really looking at is where those black pixels line up on the foreleg. Saturation is one of those blend modes that modifies the saturation but keeps the brightness and hue the same. So you can't change green to red, so the hue is the same. And saturation, it just increases it without allowing you to change brightness or hue. I went over color blending mode. I'll leave these on screen so that you guys can snapshot them if you want. There's hard mix and vivid light. There's hard light up through lighter color. The purple indicates that these are ineffective using fill. Those that are gold are the magic 8, where fill makes a difference. And the magic number for fill generally is 15%, sometimes less, sometimes you can get away with more. It's sort of a balance between opacity and fill to get the effect that you want. I have underscored some words that I thought were important in the definition. For instance, the mathematics of the screen mode might sound simple, but what they do is they invert it. We're talking about the blend mode, pixels. They multiply it, and then they re-invert it once more in order to achieve screening. Okay, not something I need to know, but I thought since I was doing the presentation, I would throw it out there so you could be impressed. All right, so this is the last of those panels. I'll let you read them as you will. And let's go and take a look at, see if I can open another picture here. And we'll try out a few of these things just to butcher it. Like I say, my computer's sick. I'm working on it, but it's taking its sweet time about things. So here we have a small insect, and we have a background. So normally what we do, of course, is we would duplicate the background layer. I usually will turn this off so it's not confusing. It's sort of a safety valve. And now let's take and just add another layer. I'm going to add a curve. But we're not going to do anything with that curve except change the blend mode to multiply. And so we get something that's too dark. But our whole intent was to perhaps give it a little bit more contrast. And in doing so, we ended up making this modification. Okay. If I want a little bit more darkness, let's see how that works out. Now, you all know, because I've talked about blend if in the past, that I can protect the lighter areas and just have this effect on dark. I won't go into it again, but just as a example, double clicking in the clear opens this box. I can now take this and I can slide both of them together down until I get basically what I want back. The option button splits this thing, and now I can adjust it like I want it. Net effect is combination of blend mode and using the blend diff. It lets me contour the bug quite nicely. Questions?
Does it work on trees too?
Should work on everything, yes. So let's change it now to screen mode. This is going to brighten everything. Let's put it back to 100%. And so this is what screen looks like out of the bat. So we look at it and we say, well, let's compare the eyeballs and see if there's any advantage and the eyeballs are the feathers.
You still have your blend if on.
You're correct. Thank you. We'll put that back there and just cancel the whole thing. Oop. I guess I have to accept the whole thing. Okay. How do you get rid of it?
You have to pull the slider all the way and then just hit OK.
I thought I did that.
Yeah, you hit canceled. So just bring the white slider on the bottom all the way to the right and then hit OK.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do the screen on this guy now. So let's go to screen. We got, yeah, that's more like it.
Mhm.
So this is before and this is after. And we have some areas. It looks like this area down in here looks better. Eyeball, it's got a little more life to it. So let's see what we can do. So we have 100%. Let's go down to 50%. Let's get it where we think you have to let go of it for it to be effective. And I'm going to do it in 2 phases. The first phase, I'm going to do it for the back body part toward the tail where I like it. And we can paint that area in by making this mask black. So if I make this mask black, I just do it easy here. And then I paint with white. It's going to let me see what's showing through. So I have a paintbrush, I have white, and my paintbrush flow. Gotta move this out of the way. I'm going to put it at about 20%, maybe 15% or 20%. And so now I can make my brush bigger. I can make it softer. And I can paint those effects into the area that I was interested in seeing them. Now you notice that I'm doing this with one brush stroke. And the reason I'm doing it with one brush stroke is I'm using my favorite tool, which if you use one brush stroke and you go to edit, you'll see fade brush tool up here at the top. The keyboard is Shift on the Mac, Command F for fade. So if I click this one, I get a slider, and this slider lets me go from no brush stroke to maximum brush stroke or anywhere in between. Okay, let's put up another curve, and let's make it screen as well. And now we'll look at different parts that we want to do. Let's say I want to work on this back wing, and let's find us a good lively looking thing, perhaps somewhere in there. Let's get us a black mask, and we'll again paint with white, and we're again at 20%, and I can paint in some of this detail back here on this wing. Maybe we'll come up into here as well. I think I liked the way it worked on his eye. So right now I've got that part, and you can see my mask is this, right? So with that now, what we want to do is let's use our opacity here. I could have used the fade tool. I'm just showing you an alternate way. But I've got the opacity slider, and I can brighten that wing up a little bit. Okay, net effect. Screen mode only. I haven't bent the curve yet. All I've used is multiplying screen, and I've taken it to here. Okay. What else could we consider doing? What if we wanted this to have some sort of a bluish cast, or I mean, we can change the contrast. Let's do that, I guess. We can do that changing a curve, but let's see if we can do it without it. So we'll put up another curved layer, but we're not going to bend it. What we're going to do is change it to soft light and see what happens. There's soft light. There's overlay. You can see overlay is harsher. Soft light is less. Let's put it on soft light. Let's reduce our opacity. And see if it's does anything for us. Let's just say, for instance, that I'm going to put the opacity just a little bit darker so we can see the difference. So here's before. You see how it changed, and it's almost got a little bit more three-dimensionality to it. We can brighten this up, obviously, but what we're trying to do is to get that 3D effect by using some of these blend modes. So if I used overlay, also a contrast blend mode, not a lot of difference. Let's see what we can do with it, darker or lighter. Here's a little bit lighter, here's a little bit darker. All right, let's take this because it's too much and see what we can do with it. So let's put us a black on here. And we're going to get a brush again, but we're going to go less with the brush this time. We're going to go down to, oh, let's say, I have to put my glasses on, sorry. Let's go and put us down at upsets opacity, don't want that. I'm a fan of using the fill rather than opacity. We'll put it at 3%. All right, so we're at 3%. I'm going to paint on the black. That's my target. And what we're going to do is we're going to darken up inside of here. And so as I darken up inside of here, I can create some of the form that I wish to have. This leg maybe is a little too dark, too light. So I can increase some shadow detail and give this thing a little bit more form. Maybe I want to go out to the wing and drop it to 1%. Again, that's on flow. And I'm going to take it and just graze down the back of it a little bit here. And so what I'm doing is darkening down that edge as if there were a shadow. So that's how I use blend modes for the most part. Now, if I did something with saturation, let's go crazy and go back to the original. Let's bring up a hue saturation. And this hue saturation, we're going to saturate it. And now let's go with color and see what happens. So if we've saturated it and we come down to, where is it? Color. This is the effect it would give us, okay? If we went to luminosity, doesn't change much. But here's color where I went way too far, but you can see the iridescent blues that I'm able to put in those feathers on the back and some in the eyes as well, okay? So the contrast is not changing, but the color is being bled in. You can see how I've put orange in the back feathers, but in the dark areas, then it's gone. So you can put it in there. You can selectively paint it in. Let's do that. We'll come up to the black. We get a paintbrush. We have a white foreground color. We've got a 1% flow, and we can come up here. And even with 1% flow, it's pretty dynamic. Okay. The effect on and off. I'm not sure you can see that, but maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now let's do some contrast change. Let's put up, let's turn that off and we'll put up a curve. And we'll put a little S curve on there that'll increase the contrast. Okay. And now let's play with the blend modes and see what color does for us. Let's see what luminosity does. So the color tries to remain the same, but you see how the luminosity allows all of the contrast effects to happen, but it doesn't blow out the color. Let's go back and add one to, let's add the hue saturation in below it. Let's add in this one, and this one, and this one. And perhaps, let's see, this one might be, nope. I think this one is the one here. Yep. We can back off on that one. So I am turning it on, going to opacity. And I can back off something like that until I get the feeling of three-dimensionality, like the wings are casting a shadow. I can semi-direct where the light's coming from. And that, to me, is blend modes. And that is pretty much the end of what I have to say. I'd like to open it for questions, comments, whatever. Anything? That scare everybody?
It was, yeah, it was crazy. Crazy nice. That was turning into a glow bug.
Yeah.
Let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to unshare my screen, or did I?
You did.
This is probably a bit more of a basic one because I've just been playing this end as well. I thought I had this previously with the layers, but you're setting up an adjustment layer and then using the blend mode within that. Is that right?
Yeah, in other words, I'm using the blend mode as the adjustment layer as a blank, if you would. All it is a container that I plan on changing the blend mode and nothing more. I could use levels, I could use any one of them. Hue saturation, I'm not moving the sliders. All I'm doing is changing the blend mode to achieve those effects.
I noticed for myself, I would be making probably too many copies and having each effect on a separate layer. And I think I like this better.
Yeah.
Anyway, the way you learn these is you just open an image and you go in there and you play with it for about an hour until you own it.
Well, that's what I'm going to.
Yeah, one of the things I did is I made a little list here that has the magic 8, special 8. Yeah, so I know which ones, if I'm playing with it, that I use the fill instead of the opacity. Yeah, I just have it up there as a memory device.
But the flow, I think, I like the flow a lot better. I don't know how many of you use flow, but what flow does is it just keeps pouring the ink out of the pen tip, if you would, whereas opacity stair steps. If you put 20% opacity, you can't get 40% without lifting your brush, and then everything is 40%. With the flow, you just paint like a painter would paint, as if you had a pen and the ink stayed out of it, and you just, this area you want darker, you keep going over and over and over it, and this lighter, so it gives you full artistic control over that segment. The one brush edit fill is one of my most important tools, and I highly suggest you try it. On the Mac, it's Shift Command F for fade. I don't know what would be on the PC. Shift, probably Control fade. But if you go up to the top, it should tell you out beside it, edit fade. And what it does is it only fades the last brush stroke. So if I'm going in and I'm working on, say, feathers on a bird, and I do one feather, I can fade that back to no effect, to a little bit of effect, and go to the next feather, one stroke, and do the same thing. I don't know what the behind and clear do much for everybody, but the tilt key turns your paintbrush into an eraser. That's a good.
But it has to be a clear layer. It can't be like a fully full pixel layer. It has to be like you're doing on a blank layer.
Yeah. Generally, I put stuff on a new layer when I'm adding pixels, and you can change to the eraser and erase it, but this is just a quick way of getting there.
Yeah. Well, I frequently use a blank layer with the pencil tool just to make my editing marks. And so the clear button would actually be able to erase the editing marks I don't need anymore.
All right.
So that makes sense, because I'm just using basically a clear layer. Then I might draw with like, super pink or whatever. So I know, what my edges are on something I'm working on. So.
But if you go and watch any of the Dave Kelly videos, he does the TK Fridays where he uses Tony Kuiper, but he has a lot of videos, and he will most often he doesn't bend the curve. He always uses multiply, screen, soft light, or overlay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how does everybody else use these things? Is there any magic tricks that somebody has stumbled upon that I don't know, or that's what this round table is all about?
Yeah, this is very interesting for what I would use it for, and also especially for the color. I think that the color in those areas, you're not messing around with, like, say, hue saturation. You can increase the saturation, but you're not changing the actual color. So any other effects you're putting on, so you don't really necessarily have to mask it, because
you need to try the saturation blend fold, because it lets you control saturation, but it locks in hue and brightness.
Right. So I mean, I'm really gonna find that useful.
And
prior to this, I was talking to one of our other sisters yesterday, and she says, I just try them all until I get something I like. And it's kind of
I did the same thing to start with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, a little show and tell. I got this in the mail yesterday.
Oh, cool.
What is it, Julie? I can't see
the Photoshop Summit t-shirt.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm still watching those videos over and over, trying to
I did that about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was overwhelming. I decided that was more than I needed.
Yeah.
Well, I got the full pass, so I could keep going back to the videos. So so I can't do it all in one pass through. So, but
I still have access, but I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that I did it. So that technology is probably gone.
But well, I did the one this year, and there was a lot of stuff that didn't really pertain to me, because like I don't edit portraits, but at the same time, some of these, like what you're showing with the just using the not changing the curve, but just changing the blend modes, and the one thing that's still freaking magic to me is blend if. Sometimes I can get it to work the way I think it should, and other times it just
Do you keep it on gray, or do you go to the other color?
Well, it depends on what I'm doing, but still, it just doesn't always seem to work for me the way I think it should work. The comprehension of it is still not. It took me like 3 months to work on the idea of black reveals and black conceals and white reveals when I first started doing Photoshop. So it's
the way I think about that lower slider is like a line through a paintbrush, a Photoshop brush. Only the things between the sliders, being the paintbrush, is going to be affected, and then everything between where you break them, that's like a soft brush versus a hard brush.
Yeah.
Everything on the outside of them is unaffected. That's why
it's just
it's
just that the terminology that some of the videos show, like protecting or whatever, it just isn't gelling with me. But I've developed an audio learning disorder from a head injury, so I have a hard time. Once I get it, but it's difficult. But I keep trying it until I'm going to get it one of these days.
Yeah, you're doing great. Everything on the outside of the sliders won't be affected. It is protected.
Yeah.
So
so
between the sliders has some effect.
Yeah, but just when I'm expecting to do something, I'm not always getting what I expecting.
Right.
So but I'm not going to give up on it. So.
Good for you.
Placement of the layers is important, Bud, too, isn't it? Another one I think I've just sort of confirmed myself. If you put your layer above your image, then everything below it gets affected. Say like the curves one, but if you put the curves adjustment within the nest of your image, your insect, you can control it on that, so a background gets left alone. Yeah, if you've done a gradient background or something, then it gets left alone, doesn't it?
Right. So basically, when you're talking about blend modes, and I talk about the blend layer versus the layer below, that layer below is your whole stack. It's whatever, it's like if you created a stamp as your base layer, and then you put the blend mode on top of it, it looks down through the stack and it blends against the stack. So that base layer that everybody talks about is your whole file that's below it.
Yeah, so anything that's visible will be affected by the blend mode on the top.
Unless you just
unless you clip
it to a layer. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So just think about when you put a blank curve layer up there and you change the blend mode to, to darken, or let's say we change it to soft light. So you got a blend mode with soft light on a curves layer that you haven't messed with. It's going to affect the entire stack. Okay. It takes the images you've gotten to that point and considers that image to that point as your base layer. I'm not sure what else to add, but I hope it was sort of a quick synopsis and rundown on how to do stuff.
What I like about this format is, like, if I watch a YouTube video on the blend modes, I get the lecture. But when we have a table like this, then you can ask a question for clarification, and
I don't have all the answers, but I try to simplify it for myself.
Yeah, but still, it's just another way of approaching it. So it's eventually it'll all sink in. But
I find the combination of blend modes and the blend if is the most powerful thing Photoshop has to offer. Except maybe the retouch tool. Whatever it is it's called. Man, that new erase tool or whatever it is, that's crazy.
I've been using that. Like just to remove specular highlights, and it just does a wonderful thing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So it like knows what you want to get rid of and keep. It's I don't know if it's mind reading or not.
Alan, you have some points you'd like to throw in?
No, I think you covered everything in plenty of detail. I think it's very helpful to review. I'm sorry for leaving my sound off. I'm freezing to death down here, and I've had this heater blowing up my trouser legs to try to keep me alive. So yeah,
that's too funny.
It is too cold down here underground at this time of year. I may have to move upstairs.
Do you do anything different than what we've talked about?
Nope. I think I'm fairly limited in how I use these tools. I mean, I heard a lot of stuff today that I've done and I've experimented with and I liked. It doesn't seem to end up in my common workflows. I mean, I use the blend modes that we discussed for basically going over hairs and edges. I use the multiply and the screen, either the screen or overlay. I find that one of them works better than the other in most cases. But other than that, I mean, I don't get too creative with blend modes. I mean, I guess I put 99% of my energy into getting the photograph that I want, so it needs relatively little in post. But I'm not as sophisticated as you guys
Bud, have you tried adding a color layer, perhaps say to an insect, adding a brown color layer and using the blend modes in order to what's the right word, dirty up, if you like, the image? It can be quite effective.
Yes, I have some textures that I do that with quite frequently. Where you put a blend mode on a texture and it fuses it into the background and you protect whatever's in front of it. Maybe you want to create a little shadow of the primary. I do stamps sometimes that way.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
But yeah, composites is the tool for composites.
Yeah, I always use the difference mode when I'm putting my astro pictures back together. If I'm trying to hand align layers.
Works great.
Yeah, and also I use the overlay. I think it's overlay or the linear dodge add when I'm putting stars back, because I take the stars out, edit, put the stars back, and keep the brightness of the stars without getting like the background of the star layer. So screening in or linear dodge, adding back the stars, it helps.
You use a luminosity mask for the stars and then reverse the selection so that you have the background stars and darken it?
No, what I in the program I use for the primary stacking of the astro images, it has a star exterminator plugin. So I hit that and it gives me one image with just stars and one image with just the nebula. And then I take those out into Photoshop and process them separately and then
that's too
put
cool.
them back together.
What program is that?
It's called PixInsight. It's designed to be used with FITS files, file information transfer files. And my younger sister hates it when I take the stars out. She said that's just not right. but if you're playing with the blending of the colors and such, if you have the stars in it, it bloats them up and messes them up. So you have to do them separately. And
okay.
But that was primarily the only reason I was using the blend modes, and the other one was for the Harrison light effect, where I'll take like pictures of smoke and convert it to black and white, and then I'll use the blend modes to just have one like blue, one green, and one red, and then you get like a colored smoke effect. And so anything that's different between the frames will come up with the color, but anything that's the same will keep its original colors. So it's just like an abstract thing. But if you have somebody walking down the street and you have three images of them walking down the street, they'd be blue, and when you blend them together, it'd be like blue, green, and red person walking down the street. It's just a weird thing to play with. But prior to this, I really wasn't doing.
One of the interesting things that I didn't tell you, hard mix, the one I use for masks, that hard mix basically converts into black, white, and 6 primary colors, which are RGB and CMY. So it posterizes things. That's why it looks so weird when you haven't reduced the fill, because it's one of the magic 8. So it just goes down to the RGB, CMY, black, and white colors. So there's only 8 colors in the posterization that hard mix does, but I find it very useful to do the black and white on the mask, but just as an aside.
I have some of the brushes, and if they don't work, and some of the kind of shape things that I was working on last week for you guys. So I'm going to hopefully get it into chat.
Oh, is there something you want to show us? We've got a minute or 2 left.
Sure, I can show you what I've been done in Adobe. Yeah, get that up.
You good with you, Alan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me expand this, undo that.
Anybody else has anything they'd like to show or ask, or the group? You're next. Nice.
I have this new glitch in my thing. Every time I hit the keyboard, it decides to flash, and I have no idea what's causing this. So I will do my best to, yeah, see, it's just on some sort of setting. Can't find it. Anyways, that's one. And let's see here, Command D. Yeah, I can't understand why it's doing that. So I have to probably hit out. So what I'll do is I can either put it in chat. I'll try that, and then
Do you have a second mouse thing close by?
nope.
It happened to me when I have another, either a trackpad or something that's active.
No, it's just what's on my thing. I've been checking like, screen save, all of that type of stuff, and there's nothing open.
There's no key that's stuck, right?
Nope.
Yeah, because I've never seen the red X over the red dot before.
Yeah, I mean, this is, so
Powerful
other
image.
thing. But every time I go to that screen on this one, I can open up other screens. Maybe it thinks it's just being, see, I can't even.
Yes.
I can close it down. Yeah, it won't even let me close it. So I'm just gonna stop share on this, but
Okay.
hopefully I'll be able to find that glitch. But I will put some in the chat now, see if I can if that works.
Okay.
But it's really, I can make up like a little step process. I put in one of the things, if I have it, if I send it as a TIFF, then you can see the channels. If I don't do it as a TIFF, then you won't see the channels and the paths. So basically take an image, color image or whatever, and then I just turn it into a black and white. And if I want it lighter to use as a kind of like a backdrop screen or something, if I'm doing a painting, then I can just lighten everything up, and then I have my areas, and then I can use my darks selectively.
Does everybody know that if you use original from Lightroom and you had a stack, it brings the stack back up into Photoshop?
Really?
It does. With TIFFs and with PSDs.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
But if you keep making a copy, then it just starts out as a base layer. But if you go back to the original, you'll be happy to know it. All your layers, the history's gone, of course, but the layers are there.
Yeah, because I generally don't. I usually only use Lightroom for cataloging, and Adobe Camera Raw for the editing on a bridge. But so Diane, you're saying that if you're going to make a brush out of an image, you should convert it to black and white first before you make a brush.
I do it. Yeah, I have a couple of samples. So
because I tried making a brush out of it was a color image, and it just wouldn't brush on correctly. It just was kind of a.
Well, what you do is you just hit it once, and it'll plop that whole image into. So I'm sending. Hopefully the custom shapes are in there, and that's one of the custom shapes that I made of this image of my cat. So when I'm painting, that's kind of what I end up doing. Custom shapes. Now I have to find my brushes and get those up for you guys. So
I'm getting a potential security issue detected from your computer. Anybody else getting that?
No, but Diane's on my contact list. Oh no, now I got it on the first one, but not on the cat.
It says, are you sure you want to download this file?
Well, it's which
I have the same.
Back into this.
Just the cat. Just the cat.
Yeah. Mine downloaded it. Yeah, I just said okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And
well, see, open it up on your Mac and see how it's doing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I got the black and white cat came through.
That's cool.
It looks like Edison. Is that Edison?
Yeah.
I can see the cat in the chat. It looks really cool.
Yeah.
And that was done doing,
That's what I do for like, so I had painted it, then I turned it into a black and white, and then I just
painted it.
I selected the whole image. I made a duplicate, selected the whole image. Then I hit, the edit and just said make brush. And so that's like a stamping brush for me. So I have a whole set of like clouds
Yeah,
and
you can make cards and things, exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I do that. And
Hey, you said you painted it. Did you paint this from scratch?
no, it's an image, but then I do extra things to it that makes it kind of crazy.
I got you.
And
That's
so I make crazy stuff like that.
yeah. Edison's been flying in space before.
Yeah, my sister said, "Oh, because my cat likes to live in a bowl when she was a kitten." And then I said, well, maybe I can have her in her own spaceship. So I took one of my antique wine glasses, took a picture of that, took the stem off and reshaped it on top of the bowl with her in it. And it was kind of like a joke. And then she went to Jupiter.
All right.
So my sister made a story, and then so I had to do her leaving the space station and then on her way to Jupiter.
Gotcha.
Our family's a little weird.
Yeah.
Anybody else got anything? Arthur, Graham?
No, nothing from me.
Alan, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bud, and thanks everybody for coming. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend. I'll get this recording up in the next day or so that you have access to it. We're going to be spending the next 2 weeks on the channel talking about color to finish up that series. So, yeah, I think that's all I have. So, everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for coming.
Thank you,
Alan.
Bud.
Excellent job.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Yep. Thank you,
That's it.
guys.
Thanks.
Do you have a